Then Jesus said to them all, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will save it." Over and over again in scriptures, we're told to be holy as God is holy. So it's not something we can say, well, it was there once, and then we can maybe rationalize not having to deal with it. It's something that comes up over and over again. And it's something that, for me, and I think for most people, is a battle. It's a struggle to try and do this command. We talked last week about how Jesus prepares us to be holy by clearing out space within our lives and within ourselves so that he can come and fill us. But this battle keeps waging on. The Apostle Paul talks about how I do these things that I don't want to do, and the things I want to do, I don't do. I can understand that a little bit because when I get hiccups big time. They're not small. They don't last for a short period of time. They last for a while. I have literally pulled muscles from the hiccups that I get. And there's nothing I can do to stop myself from having them. And it seems like holding the breath or putting the face down in the cold water for the mammalian reflex and all this stuff doesn't really seem to do the trick most of the time. I do what I don't want to do, and what I want to do, I don't do. And that's just a silly example, but I think we all have times when we've looked at our lives and we said, why did I do that? That wasn't what I wanted to do. Where you lied when you had no reason to lie. When you ignored someone when you wish you should have paid attention to them. When you did what you did not want to do and what you wanted to do, you didn't do. It's an epic kind of conflict. Most great stories have epic conflict. Whether it's Star Wars with this light side versus dark side, whether it's Batman versus all of the evil of Gotham City, or Lord of the Rings, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or even Saving Private Ryan. All of these incredible stories have epic conflict, where there are clear sides, and there are big battles and small battles that are important because they are going to decide the victor. And who wins matters. Because whoever wins is going to decide destiny and future and fate. In some cases, for entire galaxies. And here we are, called to be holy as God is holy. And whether we realize it or not, we are in the midst of this epic conflict too, where who wins matters, but it's going to decide not just life and death, but life beyond death. And so what role do we have to play to be holy as I am holy? What role are we supposed to play when we're in a conflict so big? I mean, there are two powerful sides at work here that are pretty much beyond what we could possibly control or take in on our own. On one side, you have sin and death, and they are desperate to get control back from Jesus Christ, the one who has prepared you and filled some space out for him to come and live in you. The sins that you did before, they are forgiven and gone. But there's still this bent within us, this bent to be our own ruler, to be independent from God, to love ourselves more than anything or anyone else. And what this does is it likes to try and make Jesus an add-on to our lives. Where, Jesus, I love that you're here. Can you help me get what I want? Whether it's a date with that really cute guy, a promotion at work, a good negotiating strategy to get the new car that you want, whatever it is, Jesus, you are here to help me. And the more that we try and keep turning in on ourselves and loving ourselves more than we love God and others, it's like the villains in all of these epic stories. They promise those that will come and join them reward and power, that they'll give what they desire. I mean, the whole story of Darth Vader is that he turned into Darth Vader because the Emperor promised him that he would be able to give him exactly what he wanted. He would be able to help him save the life of the woman that he loved. But instead, he ended up killing her. Because whatever the villains choose to offer as a reward or a promise, instead of delivering on that, they always end up giving destruction. And God doesn't automatically take away this bent we have to try and do things for our own self-love. He just has finally given us the ability to choose good instead, which is why there's a battle in the first place. The problem is this bent is so strong, and it requires training and it requires change in order to really choose good well. And so we feel stuck. Like we're forgiven, but my life doesn't seem to be any different. Where's this transformation that I'm looking for? There's no abundance that I was hoping to see, and I just keep going through the same thing over and over and over again. I haven't really grown in Christ. I've really just taken year one 50 times. That's how I feel about this one couple that I had in a church that we were at years ago. We had been there for about a year, but we had 2 services, and so we'd go to a different service than this older couple. But then I was asked to help with communion one day, so I had to go to the next service to do that. And I went, and my wife and I, we went and we sat down, and this couple came up and stood right next to us. Come to find out, this was a couple that had been there for 60 plus years, but no one probably had ever seen them smile. And they looked at us, and they almost literally growled at us, and they told us that that was their seat, and we needed to get up and move. Now, I'd never seen them, and they'd never seen me, and imagine in my mind, I kept thinking, what would happen if this had been somebody who had just shown up for the first day that they had said this to, instead of us who had been there and been established for a year or so. And as I was walking away, he told me that I needed to get a haircut. He may have been forgiven, but there hadn't been a lot of transformation. And when we're stuck, it's keeping us from what we were made for. It keeps us from becoming more and more like Jesus. It keeps us from being holy as He is holy. And if we're going to break out of that spot, if we're going to make a difference in this epic battle that we're caught in, then we got to do what the rest of the people do. We need to find the right weapons to win the conflict. I have some old comic book cards. I actually got a few more recently that my parents found lying around their house, and was going through them. And one of the sets, because this is such an important thing, one of the sets of cards is simply superhero weapons. Whether it's the web shooters that Spider-Man has, or the batarangs that Batman likes to toss around people, shark repellent, whatever it is, there are things that these heroes need in order to defeat the evil that they're facing. One of the coolest experiences I got to share with my kids a couple years ago was we went to go to where you could build your own lightsabers. So you didn't have to just pretend that you were Luke Skywalker or somebody else, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You could go and build your own lightsaber, and you get to pick the design style, and you get to pick the pieces, and you got to pick the color that the blade would be, and all these really cool things, because that was the most powerful weapon that you could use at the time. It was the one you needed, and you got to personalize it to you. What did you like? What's your style? What does this mean to you? And we have to use this powerful weapon to fight the bent that we have. For most of us, the most powerful weapons that we know come in 2 very different directions. But they help us try and end the battle that's going on. The first one is actually a good one. It's when you're going to need. It's discipline. It's hard work. It's being focused. And this is important, because without discipline, we do not improve what we've already been given. We need it in order to grow. Like I have these muscles here I've been given, but I will only get stronger, I will only improve what I've already been given if I use discipline to exercise and to lift and to eat right and to do the things I'm supposed to do to grow the muscles. And so maybe one day I can look like Arnold Schwarzenegger used to, but that would take a lot of discipline to get there. The problem is, no matter how much discipline I use, this will always just be an arm muscle. It can't change into something else that I could use it to do. And that's the problem with discipline when it comes to this bent that I have. I can work really hard, and I can make lots of good choices, and I can stop myself a lot of the time from doing what I don't want to do and doing what I do want to do, but there will be breakdowns in that process at some point. Because no matter how much I discipline myself, I cannot change my heart on my own. I can't bring heart change just through working harder. That's why there's this conflict in the first place. And what will happen is if I'm just caught up in trying to work harder, I'll end up with everything in my life and in my relationship with God being about having the most rigid moral standards, the best religious credentials, and I will think those are the things that are going to save me. On the other hand, because I can't seem to get things to work right, another weapon at my disposal, and one that I recommend we try and get rid of as much as possible, is justifying thoughts. These are the thoughts that look at the things that I'm doing and say, you know what? I didn't want to do this, but it's not that bad. Maybe it isn't really as sinful or as destructive as I thought it was. Or maybe, you know what? It's my right to be able to feel this way, to do this thing, to be in this place. And I end up taking these things that at one point I knew weren't good, knew weren't what I wanted for my life, and I end up justifying them in order to kind of ease the tension that I feel inside. A hard truth that Jesus teaches us is that we can't just save ourselves and we can't just change our hearts. Only God can purify us. Only He can remove this bent to be our own God. And so the weapons that we are used to using won't work. And so what I have won't work, but I still have to win this battle. You see, being holy as God is holy isn't just something that is a premium feature for our lives. It was what we were designed for. I had a car once that we were able to go get off the lot because it was a used car, but it had only been off the lot for 5 days because they had bought it, found out they were pregnant, brought it back, and got something bigger. And they had paid for all of these premium features. These weren't things you got on the base model. They had the moon roof and the Pioneer system and the alloy wheels and all these things. And we were able to get those bonuses because they had made it a used car. The conflict in getting this settled, though, is not a bonus. It's not a premium feature. This has to be standard practice for people who want to follow Jesus. And we understand that it's something that can take time, and we understand that it's something that can be a struggle, but it's still something we all have to go through if we want to grow and mature into who God has called us to be. Because how we mature in our faith isn't a matter of time, it's a matter of lordship. I can be forgiven for a really long time, but the question is, how much of my life is Jesus totally and completely in control of? Dealing with this conflict is the way that we spiritually are shaped like Christ, where our love, instead of being turned inward on ourselves, gets turned outward towards God and towards others. And to truly be able to love ourselves. And so the weapon of choice that we need in order to win this battle isn't a lightsaber or a web shooter or whatever your your Second Amendment weapon of choice might be, the secret weapon to defeating this bent within you, to ending the conflict, is a white flag. Now this seems totally unexpected. It seems to come out of nowhere. It seems counterintuitive, except that is the example that Jesus gives of his own life. Giving up his life willingly on a cross. No one took it from him. No one forced him onto it. He willingly went to the cross. And before he did that, he tells us to do the same thing. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. It's only when we surrender, when we say, Lord, I am all in. I have no other options. There is nothing that you do not have a say in. It's only in that place that he begins to change our hearts and shape it in such a way that we no longer desire what we used to desire. We no longer long for the things we used to long for. He starts to reshape us in such a way that we do what we want to do, which are the things he wants us to do. And we don't do what we don't want to do, which are the things he doesn't want us to do. And the thing about it is we can't make that change happen, but all we can do is open ourselves up to the one who can. My son inherited two qualities from his parents. For me, he's got a little bit of a night owl in him. He likes to stay up late and enjoys being able to do that. And from my wife, he has the issue of having trouble falling asleep, which those two things together can become a real problem, especially on a school night. And we've talked over the years about what we can do, and he said to us on more than one time, I can't make myself fall asleep. And he's exactly right. You can't make yourself really fall asleep that way. But there are some things that you can do to help open yourself up to sleep coming and overtaking you. When he was little, that meant when he got tired, he would spin around like the Tasmanian devil. The more tired he was, the quicker he would go. So no spinning. We're going to take a break from screens for a little bit before you go to bed. And we're going to have a fan on for some white noise. And we're going to talk about how you can breathe. And the room is going to be dark. And we're going to give you, like his doctor said, give him some melatonin before he goes to bed. And all of these things are steps of surrendering to sleep, to opening himself up to saying, so I'm ready for sleep to come. What are you doing to surrender to it and say, Lord, I'm ready for you to come? Our weapon in fighting the root of sin within us is a white flag. It is full and total surrender. Someone I had to read a lot when I was in college is Dennis Kinlaw. And he says, holiness means there is no corner of your life shut off from the control of Jesus Christ. Surrender means I take the things that used to rule my life before. You might even need to name those things. Whether it was your ambition, or your broken relationships, or your desire to be needed, or your desire to be wanted, or your will, or whatever it is, or whatever it was. And you need to lay those down. As Jesus prayed before he went to the cross, not my will, but yours be done. And it's going to look different for different people. Just like my kids and I got to personalize our lightsaber at that experience, we get to personalize what our white flag, what our surrender looks like. Because what you need to surrender is going to look a little different than what I need to surrender. For a lot of us, we like to give God most of our lives, but we hold on to parts of it. Whether they're just really precious to us, or we're hedging our bets, or whatever it is, there's parts of our lives that we just keep. Whether there are career goals, or our romantic relationships, or our secret sins. And we ask questions within our spirit, like, do I really have to give this up too? Do I really need to take this one thing? I'm giving you everything else. Do you need this one thing too? And the answer, if we really want to get past this conflict we feel inside, is yes. Paul writes to the church in Galatians, I have been crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. In the life I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Can you die to your confidence in being your own God? Can you take up your cross and surrender and say, whatever it is you want, that's what I want? And not just do that once, but do that as a commitment each and every day. That gets renewed. Each moment, that gets refreshed. Jesus, my life is yours. You are Lord now and forever. Because through surrender, God moves. It opens us up to God's grace in new ways we've never experienced. He will settle the conflict that we feel. Doesn't mean it will always go away forever because the temptation is there, but He will settle it. He purifies our lives and our intentions. He gives us a new heart that desires what He desires and loves who He loves. A heart that loves God and those that God loves, that desires His will. It starts transformation in our lives. We no longer have to be stuck. We keep becoming more and more like Jesus with more abundance in our life. We're becoming who God intended us to always be. But it takes surrender to do it. A long time ago, December, in fact, New Year's Eve, right before the year 2000 ran in, I'm sitting in a church service that I didn't want to be at because I just spent the last several months trying to figure out how to do life on my own terms. I wanted Jesus, if He wanted to come along, to be helpful, but I wanted to do things my way. I wanted to go and explore things in the directions that I wanted to go in. And I'd ended up with what started as a sounding kind of fun, very quickly became something where I didn't like who I was. And I didn't like where things were going, and I didn't want to keep going down this path, but I didn't know how to pull myself back. And as I'm sitting in the service, I do not know what was talked about, what we sung, anything else, but I do know that God met with me there in a very real way, because while I was sitting there, I literally opened my hands up like this, and I was like, I'm done. I can't hold on to anything else. Anything I'm touching is dying. Anything I'm trying to control is getting destroyed. And I don't like it, and it's not what I'm hoping for, and it's not what I want. So I need you to come and do something in me. And it was like in that moment, God took whatever broken pieces I had, and He said, I'm ready to work in you now. And the things He wanted to save, He saved, and the things that needed to go, He got rid of, and He began to transform me from the inside out. And when I got up that day, my life was never the same. I headed in a very different direction than I thought I was going to go. That's how I ended up here. If it wasn't for that turn, I never would have met my wife. I never would have had my kids. I never would have been in this place. I have had experiences that don't make sense other than the fact that because I have given my life to God, He has transformed me. And it doesn't mean that there are never moments when I'm tempted or when things want to slip in, but I have the power now because of what He's done in my life to choose to do the good. There's still some conflict every once in a while, but it's not this epic pool that it used to be. My life has been transformed. And if you want your life to be transformed, the simple thing you have to do is be ready to surrender today. Lord, I pray that in these next moments, if there's anything in us that needs to be laid down, if we need to finally give up trying to be in control and be God of our own life, that You might fill that space. I ask that we would do it. Lord, we can't transform our own hearts. We can't settle this conflict on our own. But if we're willing to surrender to you, you will move. And your grace will go to work. And you will change us from the inside out. And our lives will never be the same again. Help us to get unstuck. Help us to move where you want us to move. Help us to be who you have always intended us to be. That we can be holy as you are holy. Amen. I think it would be appropriate to end with what Paul blesses the church at Thessalonica with in his first letter to them. May God himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. The one who calls you is faithful, and he will do it.